when we met last week, did I say that already? Wasn't on tape. Just say. Anyway, we were talking about Egypt and going through the chapter. It's like really they give some of the highlights in the book, and they are definitely highlights. Evelyn, gotcha. And you got to know, first off, this culture was thriving for like 3,000 years before the Common Era. And so this is the third dynasty. So, it kind of comes back a little bit before that. But bottom line, it is like, in some ways, it's even older than some of the stuff we talked about in Mesopotamia. And it was a continuous culture. And I was doing a little scratching around, and I was looking at some of the commonly accepted dates. And usually the history of ancient Egypt is divided into three major parts, and it's Old Kingdom, 1649 BCE, which is, this is one of the earliest of the Old Kingdom. The Middle Kingdom, 2130 to 1650 before Common Era. And then another 500 years of 1550 to 1070 before Common Era. I, for the life of me, can't tell you why those dates changed, except I know that the kind of the religion and the governmental structures changed at various points in its history. And secondly, it didn't go away at 1070 before Common Era. And in fact, it existed for another 1,000 years. How many of you heard of Cleopatra, for example? Yeah, good. She's famous. But she was in just the century or so before the Common Era. In fact, she was a contemporary of Julius Caesar and Mark Antony and the Roman Empire. And 300 years before that, Alexander the Great moved into Egypt and set up a different kind of pharaoh governmental structure. So anyway, I'm not exactly sure. I can't answer why they kind of cut it off at the New Kingdom, but we're going to look at it through Cleopatra. But anyway, bottom line, Saqqara, Egypt. By the way, had any of you taken the time to watch The Secrets of Saqqara on Netflix? Okay, you don't have to, it's not a requirement. But if you kind of want to see more of this, you might take a look at that because it's really pretty good.
It's on my list, I will say that.
Oh, good, yeah.
So
Well, yeah, that's exactly why I kind of plug it. You're a Netflix user, you make your list, and secondly, what they have available changes all the time. Things go away, they come back. But I think this being a Netflix film, it'll probably stay. So you got a lot of time. But at any rate, Saqqara. And so this is where the earliest pyramids are built. And this is what we call a stepped pyramid. And this is not unlike what we see in Mesopotamia, by the way. It's really some of the same kind of architecture, same kind of building plan. And one of the greatest from the Old Kingdom, Imhotep. And so, and here it is, the mortuary precinct of Dozier, that's the Pharaoh, Saqqara, Egypt, third dynasty. That's why it's the Old Kingdom. And bottom line, this is what was in here. I showed you last week the painting about, oh, who was it? I can't remember. This, yeah, Judgment of Hunefer. And we talked about how they were weighing his heart against a feather to see if he could be admitted into the afterlife. Well, this is only part of what a pharaoh had to go through to get to the afterlife. And in this complex, they had discovered underneath all of this is a big, long underground tunnel. And in that tunnel, we believe there were like 20 stations. And it was kind of a mock-up. It was kind of a practice run for what the pharaoh might have, what the pharaoh would encounter upon his death. And so one of the stations would have the scale and would be there, and they say, okay, your highness, they'll take out your heart, they'll weigh it against a feather. It'll be past this. And then there were all of these other stations, various kinds of tests, various questions that the pharaoh had to answer before getting into the afterlife. And so anyway, bottom line, we're still finding stuff at an amazing rate. The story, the Netflix film I just talked about, that was from 2019, I believe, so that's 3 years ago. And but they find stuff all the time. I get news alerts from like National Geographic and History Magazine and different kinds of things. And it's phenomenal what they're still finding all of the time. And so anyway, and then there'll be some findings that will lead them, they think they know enough to be able to draw the plan of what was there 4,500 years ago. And so Saqqara, Imhotep was a big builder. We see these columnar entrance to the corridor of the mortuary precinct. And so one entrance hall, there we go. What they do here in Egypt will be emulated in other cultures that will emerge later on. And these columns, you see how they're built here. They're basically round slabs, and they're carved, they're fitted, and they're stacked up one upon the other. That's how most Greek columns will be made. In fact, the Greeks borrow quite heavily from the Egyptians. One of the things about this is early, and so you can see time. You can see the fit is a little not precise, but pretty good for ancient people carving this stone. But the Egyptians will influence this, but they're, how should I say this? The people like the Greeks and the Romans that come by and make columns, they'll kind of perfect this. I could say that. So I got a little part after I show you some of this. The columns. Mortuary precinct. And here are the famous pyramids, and they're just a little bit to the north of Saqqara. They're at Giza. Want to point this out too. This is the spelling of Giza as it is correctly spelled. You'll find this on maps and in literature research, spelled Giza. Just saying, it's the same place. We're just being a little more accurate these days. But these pyramids are probably the ultimate symbol of ancient Egypt. Now, I was talking about the columns. We still use this kind of stuff today. Where would you see columns like this? Presumably a little newer, not so time-worn. Well, like at the White House, absolutely. I'm sorry. Government buildings, exactly, good. Perfect. And so over 4,000 years, 4,500 years, this kind of architecture still says the same thing. It has the same meaning. Raylan, what Raylan said is absolutely true. If you want to build a building that kind of says this is an important place, this is where the government is. She got it so spot on. I was gonna make a joke. Well, I guess you guys have never been to court. No felons around. But if you go to court, that's exactly what they have. Columns done like this. And these lines that are in there, that's called fluting. And that'll change with the cultures. The Greeks pick it up, the Romans pick it up, the Europeans pick it up later. Bottom line, though, it means something. Pyramids, how should I say this? Any of you guys got a dollar bill? What's on the back? A pyramid. Yes, so much, but it's the top's off of it and there's an eye, the seeing eye. All of this stuff, this is the root of a lot of visual meaning, architectural, sculptural, and painting, language, other arts, and engineering. This is it. This is where it comes from. But it comes to like America in a kind of a weird sort of way. And I'll talk about that later, because it's not really a direct line. It's kind of interrupted for a couple of thousand years. And the Europeans rediscover it. And then the Americans discover it and so on. But at any rate, the pyramids at Giza, world renowned. There was at one time something called the 7 Wonders of the Ancient World. And you can Google that, it's still a thing. But the only one of those 7 wonders that's still here are the pyramids. And again, I'm going to go to my ancient alien theorist. There's a lot of people that can't believe that ancient people could build something like this. They just say it's too complex. They didn't have the internal combustion engine. They didn't have power tools and things. And so we got a lot of people out there saying aliens helped them out, gave them the map, and bottom line, that's caused a lot of people, and in this research, like I say, it comes up almost on a daily basis. I read something last week that kind of explained how they think the Egyptians were able to build these. Well, a lot of things they discover come from technology. And that's the secrets of Saqqara. They take the artifacts they find and they test them through scientific means. Well, this one was based on satellite imagery technology. And what this person or this group of researchers said was that the way they were able to transport these huge stones and lift them up to the right level is that they used boats. We use boats in the desert. Well, what we have right along here is the Nile River. These are not far from the Nile River itself. And what this theory says is that they cut the stones in a quarry, and then they dammed up the Nile River and floated by boat the stones to build the pyramids, and on top of which they could adjust the flow, they could adjust the level of the water high enough so that they didn't really have to lift anything. They just loaded it right off the boat, and they would, at least in theory, end up flooding this all the way to the level where they were putting the capstones on these pyramids. And there's something else about it. These are weather worn. They were covered with granite, white granite or marble, and limestone. We talked about limestone a little bit. Limestone is what you get from the seabeds. I was talking about the ancient Mississippi River, and we have all these deposits of lime under, like oil, as everything goes underneath over time, over millennia. But limestone burns. You can use it like fuel. You can use it like coal. Actually, it is a reasonably efficient biofuel. We're burning the dinosaurs with coal. We're burning the sea creatures with limestone. So anyway, but they looked much different in their day, but they think they have, through satellite imagery, figured out how they navigated their boats and used the level of the water, raise it, made this a lot easier than trying to drag and lift these heavy stones. There's another thing going on here too with the pyramids, and you can see some of this. I'll zoom in on this. This stuff right here, this is more recent excavation. And if you see, for instance, old movies about the pyramids, not like they had motion pictures, but it was generally thought and depicted in literature and on film that slaves were captured. And the Egyptians had this forced labor, had slaves to do all the heavy work on building these. Well, what we're finding out here as we dig is that that probably wasn't the case. As a matter of fact, there's evidence that what happened here is that this was a community of workers. And they had shelter, they had food, they can find, in those, when they dig, they can find remnants of what kind of food they had. They had wine, they actually brewed beer. They had, and we're finding too, as they understand more about the hieroglyphics, that they were probably paid laborers and they were probably very well treated, which is a total reversal from what had been believed for thousands of years. And so that's a new development. And as I said, there's more stuff we know all the time. And so anyway, this is what we know about the section of the Great Pyramid. And it is essentially a tomb. And this guy here, Khufu, he was the pharaoh means king, that built these. And we know about some of these shafts, and there's been some talk about these shafts when you're in this chamber, the king's chamber and the grand gallery, like up in here, that when you're looking out, it lines up with certain stars that in theory is supposed to be important. And there's a lot of stuff down here that we really don't know, and 9 being that we look at as air shafts, but they might be something else. They have, here's number 7, false tomb chambers. And what we find in Egyptian burial tombs is that there actually is a lot of that. And grave robbers were expected. So they had to kind of decoy. You'll find a lot of empty chambers and things. That Secrets of Saqqara film talks about some of that too. Trying to figure out whose remains is where. But bottom line, 7 wonders of the ancient world. And here is what it looked like back in the day. And the pyramid of Khufu, Khafari, and Menekar. I can't pronounce it, but anyway, that's who's 8 pyramid royal family and Mastabas. So anyway, it was kind of a cemetery of sorts. The Great Sphinx right there in front, the pyramids at Giza. We're still digging around here. You go and Google this one, by the way. This was one of the subjects of some of the earliest photography. Period. It was one of the great ancient monuments that was still intact. But you see the old photos of this, and the level of the sand was much higher. And so you just really kind of get the tops of the feet and stuff. Well, what they've been doing in the last 100 years or so is that they've been excavating all around. They found that the Sphinx itself was much, much bigger than originally known. Yeah, what happened to the face? There are different theories on that. One is that an invading army, because in the Common Era, Egypt had been invaded many, many times. It started with the Alexander, Julius Caesar, and so on, but that continued for many centuries, and that they think that this was used as target practice for a cannon. We don't know, it's damaged, but there's a lot of stuff underneath here that they simply don't know about yet. And here's one of the pharaohs buried in at Giza, Khafre, enthroned. Diorite. That's a really hard stone. But I want to kind of talk about some of this here for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 slides, is the degree of naturalism we see. And we see that the pharaoh here, he's on his throne. But, you know, in a lot of ways, it's like I was talking about it in Sumerian sculpture. We see the head of the Akkadian king or something, Sargon the First, the Great. You can see that there's an attempt at an accurate naturalism portrayal. And that's why I wanted to get to this, because what we see, this is a fine depiction of sculptors working on a statue. But here we go. Fourth dynasty, Pharaoh and his wife. And yes, Grace.
Where's on the last side, it said where that was held, like the museum, is it about the side? Or no, maybe on the board.
Okay, I couldn't quite hear you. I got this thing. Where's Thebes at, is what you're asking?
No, it said the Kafari in Rome, it said on one of the slides where that was held, which museum that was held in. Yeah. Egypt.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, sure. And Grace, I'm glad you're paying attention to that, because that was another thing I wanted to bring up today, and that is a lot of the recent discoveries of the last 40 or 50 years easily. They belong to the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. But before that, and I'll show you some of these, Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. Now, America, the US did not colonize Egypt, but what happened over time is, and this is from the Louvre, what happened, I almost got to jump into this because it's such a good topic. I'm going to end this. I'm going to talk about this. And slideshow from the beginning, and share screen. I think this is it. Medina, can you see this? Rosetta Stone. Double check that. Yeah, that should be the screen going up. Sometimes the microphones. It's all right. Rosetta Stone. what the heck is that all about? Learn 24 languages, get a big box of CDs or jump drives, plug them in. And learn language. Why do they call it Rosetta Stone? And
Because of the giants, that help the students.
yes. This thing,
Oh, that.
and, well, see, they got the shape of it here. This is a close-up, a detailed shot here, 3 detail shots. And what you have here, because the Egyptian culture existed and flourished for so many years, a lot of things changed in 1,000 years, or 2,000 years, or 3,000 years. And what you have up on top is the old Egyptian hieroglyphics. The middle section, New Kingdom Egyptian writing. And if you take a good look at it, you can see it's a precursor to Arabic. You see how the characters are placed. And you see on the bottom, what we have is Greek. But what we would refer to now as Old Greek. So the story, as Emily pointed out, it's how we translated. That's how we figured out how to read hieroglyphs. Now, this stone was part of the treasure that Napoleon brought back to France. And in fact, when we had invaders like Napoleon, sometimes they took just about everything that wasn't nailed down, and even some stuff that was nailed down. But they found this and they shipped this back to France, and they had their scholars, their linguists look at it. They still knew how to read Greek. And they figured out or assumed that this said the same thing in 3 different languages. And basically, it's a stela, a stone monument, and it basically describes what you should do while you're in this place. You know, it's kind of like their version of having speed limit signs and no loitering and stuff, but it was about their concerns 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. And so it's about, after, it's just a set of rules about, what is expected of you if you come into this place. It's the laws. And so they figured it out. They knew Greek, and when they compared it to this, and they said, this checks out. If this character means this, then I see it all, blah, 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 decoding it. And then they assumed that it was written in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. And so that is it. That's the Rosetta Stone. That's why Rosetta Stone, Learn Your Languages, uses this as their logo, their trademark. It's one of the great mysteries of the ancient world solved. And so here, this is a better picture of the Sphinx. And this is what I was talking about. You can see how deep they've gotten. You can see the scaffolding there. Ongoing discovery. We talked about the columns just a little bit ago and talked about how that that architecture speaks of or denotes authority and importance and official culture, the law, government, so on. Funerary Temple of Queen Hatshepsut. And you can see it's in the New Kingdom, one of the earliest New Kingdom, but she had this grand temple built as a place she was buried. And to be sure, there are other important people and other pharaohs buried here. But this is like, what do you think about this architecture? We're talking about columns. Look at this. Well, I got a really disgusting illustration. The Zeppelin Field Parade Grounds, Germany, 20th century. See the similarity? Again, going back to ancient architecture, in this case, Egyptian, and this long horizontal, the columns are repeated. You have the place in front. And this ended up being the Nazi parade ground. You can see they adorn it with flags, and then they ended up putting a big old swastika over here, down in the corner. After the defeat of Germany, this is like a real famous little 10-second video clip. Some American engineers put some explosives up there and blew the Nazi symbol, the swastika, right off of it. But at any rate, you can see what they're borrowing from the ancients. This is an interesting thing too. I got it on the other PowerPoint. Akhenaten, Karnak, New Kingdom. This is King Tut's father. And this is an enigma as well, because there seems to be maybe some gender bending here. See the body shape. We were talking about these other pharaohs and quite muscular, broad shoulders, and always the prototype male. Look, this body shape is almost like that of a female. And bottom line, you can see it has some breasts too. So this is a mystery. We don't know why this is. There's been a lot of theory put to this, but the other interesting part of this is Akhenaten's, the other depictions of Akhenaten have him with this elongated head. And what we think, the best evidence points to a practice not unique to Egypt, but where they would bind a baby's head, wrap it up, rope, cloth, something, and actually, as the child grows up, shape the head. Yes, I know it seems weird. There are other cultures where there are other kinds of alterations of the human anatomy. There's some cultures that will put rings around the necks, primarily female children. And as they get older and develop, they add more rings, and it like elongates the neck. So this kind of body distortion practice is not unique. Another one that happened and pretty much happened until the 20th century was that in China, Chinese would bind the feet of their girls, their female children. And so their feet never grew, they would always have small feet. So this kind of practice existed, we think, in Egypt. Now, alien theorists say, no, this proves that the aliens came down, but you know. And here it is. This is the same slide I have in the PowerPoint. Akhenaten and Nefertiti. Akhenaten was King Tut's dad, and this is Nefertiti, King Tut's mother. And you can still see some of the maybe feminine characteristics of Akhenaten. But here's something that's really kind of interesting. You can see here too, maybe some evidence of binding the skull, what I was just talking about. And this is like so unique in the fact that this pharaoh is playing with his kids. That's something like I do, you know. Got my grandkids and they play hop on pop, you know. Bottom line, that is not how pharaohs were depicted before this time and really after this time. Actually, Akhenaten picked up and moved the capital of Egypt to Karnak. He built a whole new capital city, and he changed the religion too. He believed in the sun god, and here is the sun shining the rays down. We know we can translate some of this because now we know what hieroglyphics spell out carbon.
In this image, I can see a man with a mustache.
Yeah, let's zoom in on that. Yeah, it kind of looks like a mustache. I'm not sure.
Down. The places where the thighs are the two eyeballs. The thing is, the nose of those two little slabs are the mustache.
Okay, I'm trying to figure this out. I'm gonna go back.
Looks like a man with a mustache.
Okay, where am I? Am I warm? Oh, this guy here?
I will take a picture. I'll read where it is.
Okay. So, one of the things, we'll get back to Akhenaten here, but one of the things that Napoleon brought back, but it had been known for a long time because the Romans used this too. Ancient Egyptian obelisk, and an obelisk is basically this long sort of square that tapers off at the top and has this sort of triangle top. Thousands of years old, like we were talking about the dollar bill and the pyramids. Bottom line, the obelisk has come to signify something of importance. And so these were all over. These were all over Egypt. A lot of them, when Napoleon came through in 1798, they hauled a bunch of these back over to Europe, and you find them all over the place. This is a Veterans Memorial in Kirksville, where I used to live, but they put an obelisk there. And here's the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C. Anybody know any history about the Washington Monument? Well, it was built in the 19th century. And there was some objection to building this as the monument to George Washington. Seems weird now. But there were a lot of people that thought this was, because it was Egyptian and pre-Christian, it was pagan. It was a pagan monument, and we don't want a pagan monument for the father of the country. It was quite controversial. But bottom line is that these things hold their meaning over centuries. Carter, what you got?
Read the man with the mustache.
Okay. Now,
Kind of was like a man with a mustache now.
this guy, I don't, show me.
Oh, God. I don't get it.
Oh, yeah,
You got something. Like this. It's alien mustache.
yeah, I know. It's funny.
It has something to do with this. I don't get it. I don't get it.
Well,
And with the mustache. Okay.
oh, I see what you're
Just Carter
saying.
shows up.
Okay, what Carter's talking about is that if you draw this as an eye, and this as an eye, this as a nose, and that
Yeah,
as,
I see it, mustache.
yeah,
I see it. Look, so the legs.
eyes,
eyes,
nose.
The thing in the nose.
Yeah. That's an interesting,
Oh, I think I kind of see it.
yeah,
Very clever.
that is good. I like that. And you know, one of the reasons I really like it, because you're actually looking at what's here. I love it.
A lot of
Yeah.
people who make beans, like they look at every one of those little details no differently. They condense.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, and there've been a lot of mysteries written about ancient artifacts and people discovering particular meanings in objects from antiquity. So, yeah, I'm good with that. And now I can't see it any other way. It's like the FedEx truck with the arrow, yeah. Now I can't see it.
Or how Amazon that has the little arrow in it, because it has everything from A to Z.
Yeah, absolutely great.
A little comment for that essay that you tonight in the quiz. It says no more than 2 pages. Is there a minimum for that? The quiz, like is it I have to write it about the art?
Yeah. I guess minimum of 1 page. I'm not sure. You will cover it all in 1 page, and we kind of talked about that a little bit before. That I showed you a 1-page example, and bottom line was that there were a lot of things that could have been said, but I don't want it to be overstuffed, you know. So, yeah, somewhere in the range, if you cover the points, you know, we're good. Obelisk. Oh, this is the Anubis.
Oh, boy.
Yeah,
I've seen those before
yeah,
in anime.
in anime. A lot of what happens with superheroes.
I definitely saw that idea. I have not seen any of these, but I like it.
Yeah. This stuff, I mean, you know, goes back to antiquity. I like that. Goes back to antiquity, and that goes back to, I'm thinking Viking culture.
Yeah, I think I.
Oh, I didn't see all of it. You got a cow.
Yeah. just got it.
Yeah. Bottom line, it's still with us today. I want to show you this too. Khufu, he's got the big pyramid there, and I was talking about earlier about how the pharaohs had to pass a series of tests on their way to the afterlife, and what they were, if they passed the test, they were carried to the afterlife in what is called a solar boat. And it is a boat they would put in the Nile, and presumably they would sail up to the sun. And so this is the boat museum, and this is it, right? This is part of it right here. But here's the Khufu, or the Khufu, I'm sorry, solar boat. And it's kind of recently discovered. Now let's see. And gotta make sure. Medina has got it. Yeah, we're good. So let me play this. This is a short little tourist video, but the Khufu ship. Partly what I want to show you is like what this actually looks like in situ. You were to go there. Tourists from all over the world. See, we didn't see this on the photos in the book. You guys read that. Tickets to the boat museum can be purchased. Oh, got it. Bottom floor of the museum has a few small exhibits, but the Khufu boat is on the upper level. The Giza Solar Boat Museum was constructed in 1985. The Khufu ship was discovered at this location in 1954. It was not fully reassembled until 1968. The Khufu ship is a fully intact vessel that is over 4,500 years old. And so I'm kind of wondering if I do this, will we hear the narration? No. Oh, wait. Because
You try to write including the text.
I'm sorry, say what?
And you try to write including the text. The text doubles on the screen. You're in the middle of the screen.
I know I had it popped up. And I don't know what happened. Because there was a narration, I don't know why it's coming up. Like, can you help me? Yeah, you can hear something going on. Oh, there it is. That's good. Well, it's a solar barge or sun boat, and it represents the sun riding in a boat. One of the things about this, and I thought this was because I know I heard this, what they talk about here is how they put this together and they didn't have nails. They actually tied this together with twine, which is really quite remarkable. And they figured would allow Khufu to sail across the heavens after death with the sun god Ra. And so that's what it's for. It's right outside the pyramids. And so anyway, you got to look at it. And in a lot of ways, it's really quite amazing. The fact that that the boat survived this long under the desert sand, in a lot of ways is remarkable. And so now I gotta change this here. And did I lose my other PowerPoint? Oh, there it is. And there's the museum, and there's the Secrets of Saqqara tomb. I wanted to kind of finish this up, and I apologize because I'm not getting the narration. It was in English. I don't know what the heck. But bottom line, I wanted to tell you a little bit more about this. The idea that you would put your dead leader in a boat and bury your leader in a boat, that will persist for another 2,500, 3,000 years. And what we find today is, excuse me, bottom line is that we're finding burial boats all over in Northern Europe. There's one, there's another Netflix, it's actually a movie, not so much a documentary, called The Dig. You ever see it on your Netflix? And it's about a burial boat where a guy from maybe the 9th century, English sea captain, conqueror, was buried. There's an earth mound. Archaeologists knew there was something underneath there. what was underneath there was this boat. And all of the stuff, just like in Egypt, where they would bury their fallen leaders, their leaders of the people of importance, they would bury them with what they need in the afterlife. And this is in England, circa 800 AD. The Vikings did that. If the captain of a Viking ship died, they would bury the boat with the captain. And we're digging those up around Northern Europe too. And so another thing that we think originated in ancient Egypt and persisted for thousands of years. And so, any questions? How the papers come? Good.
Turn my name, yes.
Yeah, I got a few of them. So actually, I got almost half. I put the deadline off until after this class because I thought if you had any questions, like Grace had a question, I'm liking it. And so there's 11 minutes left. What should we do?
Find more mustache.
Hey, I like it. Anybody know good joke? And anybody heard any good jokes lately?
No.
Oh. See, back in my day, before we had internet and YouTube and all of this other stuff, we had to like memorize jokes, and that's what you would do, go to work. Hey, I heard a joke last night. I went to this oldies concert in St. Charles a few weeks ago called Happy Together. And they were all people of my age. And some of them told jokes in between the songs. One of them, and it's just reminded me when I was a kid. Guy said, you know, my wife and I had an argument, and I just had to tell her, honey, you have to learn how to embrace your mistakes. And then she hugged me. Just saying. That's the kind of stuff we grew up on. What did the 0 say to the 8? Your belt's too tight. Okay. I ran out of jokes. So I guess I'll see you guys on Monday. Yeah, sure. Most of what I remember from all right,
So I can orphans play baseball.
oh, yeah, we used to do that. Oh, yeah. That's not so bad. I've heard much worse back in my day. We would call them cruelty blows, you know. Not, thanks a lot. I'll see you on Monday. No, not the new one.
No, not the new one,
The old,
the 1990s one.
yeah, okay,
See that one?
yeah, yeah, well, see, ancient Egypt, it's still all over the place.
Yeah.
And I forgot what I was gonna do here, because I found starting off one day. There was a movement in 100 years ago Oh, Art Deco,
Mm.
and they borrow a lot of stuff. Yeah, I'll show you on Monday.
Oh,
All right,
thank you.
you bet.
Totally missed it. I was at the beginning of class and I had no idea if I answered.
Oh,
I don't know if you can check that now. If not, no big deal.
well, Olivia came on.
Because my iPad was like, was not responding.
And Gracie's. And so remind you.
I'm on the one.
That's right, and I do have you down.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
I think I might have said something. I couldn't remember for sure. I was sitting.
well, I'm glad you double checked. I want to get things right. Just like you,
Yeah, thank you.
you bet.
Have a great one.
You too.
Sorry I was late, right? Clearly having a very difficult time balancing my staying investor.